Hi, I'm David Wood from PlayForReal.life. I coach executives, high performers, leaders on how to find and speak their truth so they can create the amazing results they want for their life and business. Today on the show, we're going to talk about speaking your truth, why people avoid tough conversations, how you can have that tough conversation artfully so you can be the leader that you would follow. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. To find out more, go to FullMontyLeadership.com. Let me ask you, in what ways do you need to up-level your leadership? What's the conversation that you're avoiding? And how would it up-level your leadership, your relationships, and even your life to have it? Well, let's find out in a bit. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes on our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. So simply look for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, though, so please go over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate it. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. Also look for us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also go to Google Home or Alexa and just say, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. My co-host on this particular episode is Mr. Joel Bauer. Joel is the master of mindset for the amazing Seller e-commerce training company and has helped others build million-dollar brands from scratch. He is now showing people how to own their health and get ready for a massive advancement in the medical sciences that is coming right upon us. Okay, back to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. All of us, whether we realize it or not, are having these defining moments. These are moments where we decide on the meaning of our lives. As we stand in that fork in the road, there is the opportunity to look back into the familiar and the comfortable, or to be daring and to step off the edge towards, well, potential flight or what will feel like potential death. But until we make that leap, we will never know. It's in these moments of potential daring where we find out what we are made of. These are the moments where we either shut down and cling to what we know, or we tear ourselves open and reveal that we don't know, and we begin to listen in a way we never have. So how can you and I be more daring as leaders? How can we embrace that level of vulnerability that will make us into spectacular leaders? Well, let's find out together, because our guest on this episode is David Wood. He's a former consulting actuary to Fortune 100 companies. David left his cushy Park Avenue job of 20 years ago to build the world's largest coaching business. He became #1 on Google for life coaching, serving an audience of 150,000 coaches and coaching thousands of hours across 12 countries. He is the author of Get Paid for Who You Are. David believes that the tough conversations we avoid are our doorways to confidence, success, and love. They become the defining moments which shape our world. He coaches high-performing entrepreneurs, executives, and teams. and now prison inmates to create amazing results and deep connections, one tough conversation at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and help me welcome the author of Get Paid for Who You Are, Mr. David Wood. And the crowd goes wild, young man. Welcome, David. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Dove. I enjoyed that crowd. I could use that every morning.
Yep. We're sending them over right now. They'll be there in 20 minutes, and they'll be every morning just waiting for you.
I'll put another slab of beer in the fridge.
Good lad. So we like to start every show by asking for you to tell us something that you find yourself curious about right now. What is it you find yourself pondering and curious about these days?
One thing I'm curious about is how humans can do things that feel uncomfortable or even painful if they know that there's enough upside. So, for example, exercise. Right? We might be uncomfortable because we want the body that we want to get. Or some people here go and jump in Boulder Creek while there's ice all over the creek because of some perceived benefit. And I found these eye drops that come from a jungle plant that you put in your eyes and it sets your eyeballs on fire. Agony for maybe a couple of minutes. And I've started doing it because I believe it'll correct my blurry vision. So animals don't seem to have this ability, but humans have the ability, and it relates perfectly with tough conversations because no one walks around going, well, very few people say, I want to have a tough conversation today. But once we can see the upside, then we might be willing to be daring and to embrace the discomfort because we know that we're going to win. And ultimately, everyone's going to win in the long run.
Yeah, it is a curious thing that human beings have that ability to choose pain, whereas most other animals will certainly go the other way.
We usually go the other way as well. We're creatures.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
And I still don't do cold showers, and I'm pretty sure it's good for me, but I'm scared. So that's one of my edges.
Yeah. The Wim Hof method. It's, I have a lot of my mates who do it, and I still own to being fully wimpy enough to not do it.
Yes.
I can barely do a cold shower, and that's what my mates are doing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? The ice bath, I think I might be singing like the Bee Gees after that.
Yeah.
That's only for the first few times, and then you're right in it.
You've done it, right, Joel?
I do it daily, yeah.
Whoa.
It is a set practice, yeah. I actually found it's interesting you said that, but they're actually did studies, and they find that there's actually a change in the cells over time. So the reason it's such a nightmare, yet other people there is a change physiologically that opens that up. But again, if you don't know that, like it does, it seems like you're just jumping off the cliff every time for the first like probably 20 or 30. You're just like, what am I doing?
so that's important, I think, for humans, as humans, to know. With the Sananga, this thing I put in my eyes, it's not as dramatic as it used to be. Like one guy screamed the first time it was in his eyes, and now I know what to expect, and I think I'm shifting and building a relationship with it. Same perhaps with Wim Hof, and the same with speaking your truth and tough conversations. I still find it edgy and difficult, but not like when I started. So if you're willing to get in and be uncomfortable, let's take heart in the idea that we can develop a relationship with it and a skill. So
I agree. And it's the premise of my work too, as you and I talked about before, is that the premise is that the only way we will fully reap the benefits of anything is to step into the discomfort, not to step into the comfort. And that truth is not found in comfort. It is only found in discomfort. But that takes enormous courage for most people.
Well, you said something in there, David, you mentioned the word skill. And I think that's actually where people have the hardest time is like, you aren't like the first time you do it, you aren't very good at it. You don't know that if you're having that real full conversation. So how do you help people like at that space where they really are like, they're not good at it yet. They don't know how to like frame it correctly to allow the conversation to open, but just that fear side's just sitting there.
Yeah. Well, what I do is I finally created a worksheet because I realized part of what makes it scary, and maybe we should define what we're talking about. A tough conversation could be with your boss. You're thinking, hey, company's doing the wrong strategy and I need to speak up about it. Or you're
Mm-hmm.
micromanaging me. Or I think I'm ready for more opportunity and I'm being held back. Or I just got off the session with a VP. He's like, I don't want to tell this person her performance is not up to scratch. Like, this is awkward for me. Like, yeah. So there's so many conversations that are hard to say, but part of it's because the mind is unclear. We haven't gotten clear on things like, what's the upside? What could come out of this conversation that could be great for both of us? What's the downside? Why am I nervous about it? Let's really look at it and see if I'm willing to risk those consequences. And then I think the third thing on the worksheet is, what's a request you could make?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to just go in and complain. Is there a specific thing you can ask for that would improve the situation? And then once you've done the worksheet, that clarity can make it so much less scary. It's like, now I can at least see all the pieces. And then if you decide to have the conversation, you can just go and follow the 4 steps on the worksheet.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier than just going in with, I don't feel good about this and I want something to change, but I don't know what it is. And I like you less because of it. Like that, it can just be a train wreck because the mind's so unclear.
Yeah. And then, there's this like scary space. Like, what, it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a face. You just like, something bad's going to happen. I don't even know what.
That's it.
But, yeah.
That's exactly it.
And this is the thing, is the mind is going to protect. And part of that protection is to do a negative consequence and to project forward in a negative way. And one of the things that we teach is the importance of doing that projection, walking it through. Because actually, if you actually walk the negative consequence through, you'll usually see that it's not as bad as you think it is. And then, as you know, as Joel and David have just both of you just said, I think that oftentimes, even when we do that, we don't bother to go, well, what is the positive possible outcomes of this? So we look at the negative outcomes, and the mind makes that into catastrophic. If you logically, rationally walk it through, you go, okay, well, will I die? No. Okay. So what is the possible positive outcomes? Right. And for me, when I do this with my clients, I say, so you walk the negative through, you walk the positive through. And then when you're done, I say this, okay, now what's the positive possible outcome of the negative outcome? And they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, that's called a mind intercourse. It's meant to be. But the purpose of it is that even if you got fired, what's the positive that comes out of that? Let's just use that as an example.
Yeah.
Or even if your missus blows up at you, what's the positive that can come out of that? And we don't go to that. The ego likes to stop at a certain point, and that point is where you'll retract into safety, as opposed to going, okay, let's consider that. So I think you're right, David. I think people need a structure to step into that makes it safe for them. Now, talking about safety and lack of safety, you and I had chatted in our previous conversation about you and I have certain things in common around facing certain challenges. Most of my listeners know about me falling off a mountain. You're no stranger to overcoming challenge, in that you overcame a paragliding incident. Let's talk to us a little bit about that, because I want people to have a bit of a frame of reference.
Sure. Well, the incident, in flying terms, an incident is where there wasn't an accident, but there was something worth reporting.
Yeah.
The incident was, I was flying in Bali and I was 300 feet above the ocean, and I had a full collapse of my wing, which rarely happens when you're on the ocean because the air is so stable. But something was wrong with my wing, and I was plummeting towards the earth, and I recovered at 80 feet. So reinflated and walked away from that one. But then a year later, I was in Colombia, and I was about to touch down on the top of a mountain, which is a little more advanced, to land up the top. And there's a lot of wind currents and thermals, and you can get more collapses there. And I was a foot off the ground, and a little bubble of air caught my wing, took me back into place where the air wasn't so clean, and I didn't control the wing properly. And I was only 10 or 15 feet above the ground when part of my wing collapsed. But if you fall from 10 or 15 feet onto your butt, I fractured my spine and went to hospital in an ambulance. Someone said, "Oh, you were rushed to hospital?" I said, "That would be nice if I'd been rushed," but I was in Colombia. And so they put me on a stretcher and put me in a shed and left me alone for an hour waiting for the ambulance. And then it ended up a great ending to the story. I walk now, I don't have pain, and I've decided that I'll keep my feet on the ground for the foreseeable future, because I was willing. This comes back to the tough conversations issue. I was willing to face the consequences back then. If I was injured or died, I was willing to face that consequence. Now I'm not willing to face that. So I've let go of that and I pursue other things that.
But what changed? Because you said you were willing. I mean, I know, because I was a free climber and I was an adrenaline junkie, and I don't do any of those things anymore. So what changed for you? I'm interested to know that. What changed for you that took you from that place of, yeah, I'm willing to pay that consequence. It's a possibility, but I'm okay with that. And then I'm not.
It might be having something actually happen. So I got to not just think about the theory of it, but I felt it. And this was the second time I'd fractured my spine. The first time was a parkour accident.
Right.
And I was 42 or 43 and thinking, why, it's all in your head. You know, why can't I do this? Well, I learned why you can't do this. The body doesn't heal as well when you're older. So that was one thing. And then I don't know why my interest in living increased, but I was like, no, I want to stick around. This, you know, particularly with technology and what's happening. Someone pointed out in a speech that it's not a good time to die. It's a good time to stick around. There's such exciting things happening. So I don't have an exact answer for what changed. I just decided I want to
let's go the other way, which is, why do you think you did those things? Why do you think that you were involved in those kinds of sports, doing the things where you know, parkour or doing paragliding or whatever it might be, where your life could be in danger? Because, you know, you're talking about having these bold conversations that you know, which are quite terrifying for many people. And yet, you know, you weren't doing those, you were doing these sports. As I said, I can fully relate. There's no judgment here. So I'm really interested in what pulled you towards those.
I think what it comes down to is risk assessment. And my job as an actuary, for people who don't know what an actuary is, was to do risk management and risk assessment. We'd study probability and statistics. And I think a lot of people are too reckless when it comes to some physical safety issues like smoking or drinking or eating sugar. They haven't fully done the risk assessment. If they fully embraced what could happen, I don't think they would do those things. And a really great example is people who go to Bali and they ride a scooter without any motorcycle training. They'll ride a scooter in a chaotic environment, and it's maybe hard for you to believe, but won't wear a helmet. Like,
hard for me to believe I did it in Bali.
let me get on a moving vehicle. Let me do something that has the highest rate of like permanent brain damage and death in the world, and not wear a protective layer around my head. Like, that blows my mind that people can do that. And it's same with seatbelts. I won't wear a seatbelt, or I'm getting tense talking about it. Someone who drives, let's say they go 10 miles past the speed limit. All right, no big deal. But let's say they do it on an unfamiliar road. You've added another risk factor. Now let's suppose it's nighttime. Now you've got a lack of vision. Now it starts to rain a little bit. You got a slippery road. And I just got a phone call. Your chances of death have just raised by so much. If people knew, I don't think they'd do it. And I hadn't fully confronted like what it would feel like to be paralyzed or maybe a quadriplegic or to lose my life. I hadn't really realized how likely that was and what it would be like for my life. Same with parkour. I just thought I'll keep focused, and I hadn't watched videos that showed people missing and hitting an object with their face at full speed, crushing their face. So after my accident, boy, I really feel ramped up right now. After my accident, I went and forced myself to watch paragliding videos, accident videos. I said, David, if you're willing to fly after watching these videos, then go ahead. And after watching those videos, I was no longer willing to fly, because I saw time and time again things that happened to good pilots who knew what they were doing. So
but you had parkour fall.
Yep.
You had the paragliding experience in Bali.
Yep.
You had your warning signs.
Yep.
So it was, as an actuary, as a guy who can risk assessment, that for me is very interesting, because you did have the awareness. You did have the knowledge. Like I said, I fell off a mountain 120 feet. It was my fourth fall. And I'm not a dumb guy, but it was my fourth fall. It was the fourth one. So, there's this parallel here. Joel's thinking, what is with these lunatics? And he just gets in cold water.
Yeah.
And we think he's crazy.
And to make it worse, I shouldn't put myself further in the hole, but I had 2 hang gliding accidents before I started paragliding. Yeah.
So for me, there's something in, and this is really important for the people listening, looking in, because, you're all about having these courageous conversations and speaking about the things that are there. And one of my things that I say to people all the time, and I want everybody to get this, particularly in the context of this conversation, is that courage is subjective. And I really want you to get that, because you might look at someone like David or me and the crazy shit we did and think, wow, those guys are courageous. No, it didn't take me any courage. There was no courage for me at the time. It would be extremely courageous for me to do now. I don't do those things. But I think it's courageous for Joel to have a cold shower. I really do. Right. I mean, people think, well, that's ridiculous, Doug. No, it's subjective. And so if you are feeling frozen and terrified at having that conversation with your boss, with your wife, with your husband, with your mother, whoever it might be, and you're feeling paralyzed with fear with that, understand that that's no different than jumping off a mountain. That's no different than free climbing. It is a real fear, and your brain does not know the difference. And that is why if you were going to paraglide or if you're going to free climb, you would train for it. And what David's giving you with this chart, with this walk it through, is exactly the training for that conversation. And that is why this is important. Yeah. Because we don't want you to jump off the cliff. I know, because I've guided people in this process for years, and I watched them jump off the cliff without any training. One of my friends got thrown out of his dad's house for trying to have a courageous conversation, and his dad threw him out and locked the door because he didn't practice. He didn't understand the training. And he was incredibly courageous, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't trained. So there's courage plus training. So training plus courage, rather.
Ooh, that's good. I'm going to write that down.
I was seeing those parallels. Is like, you're having the opposite side of that. When you know the risk, when you know the factors going into it, sometimes you don't have that conversation. You're not there yet, or you're not ready for it, or there's another one. And I found that really, as I'm hearing the parallels with the sport, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. When do we not have the conversation? When do we assess the value and go, hey, it's not time to be courageous in this conversation yet?
Yeah, so I want to talk about, but I think you've raised 2 topics that I find really interesting. One is about the training. So let's do that first. And then when do you not? So with the training, I don't want you to just go to your partner and blurt out, hey, I cheated on you 5 years ago, right? I'm not suggesting that you do that. I actually have a personal belief that that's a step up from not ever saying it at all. Mm-hmm. I think it's a step up. As Dove said, what's the positive outcome that could come from the negative? And I do believe in those, but take the training, do the worksheet. If you like, Dove, I don't know if we talked about it. I have a giveaway. We can give away a download with the worksheet for free.
Sure.
And so your chances of it being a train wreck are way less.
Mm-hmm.
But what Joel says is when do you not have the conversation? And this comes right back to our conversation now. When do you not jump off that cliff? When do you not take parkour? When do you not take a cold shower? When do you not have the conversation? When you do the worksheet, you'll look at, or if you follow Dove's process, you'll look at what's the negative outcome, what's the positive outcome, and then do I think there's enough upside? Am I willing to risk the negative outcome? Now, I'll give an example where I wasn't. I was in Bali a couple of years ago, and I rented out my villa. I rented someone else's villa so I could live somewhere. And then I sublet one of my rooms. Now, in Bali, that's a big no-no. It's actually a no-no technically in any country, including the US, because you're earning money and you don't have if you don't have a working visa and you're not from that country, it's actually illegal, but no one cares in most countries. But in Bali, they can get big bribes, so it's a big deal. And I knew that it was a problem, but I figured everyone else is doing it, I'll just do it. Well, someone showed up at my door and said, "You're wanted for questioning." He said it in Indonesian, but he said, "You're wanted for questioning tomorrow in Denpasar, the big city, because you've been illegally subletting a room." And I did some really fast research and found out that I was looking at not just a fine and not just deportation, which I was willing to risk, but I could be held in jail while negotiating a bribe. And so if they didn't like the number that I came up with, I might be in jail for months, possibly, because I wouldn't agree to pay 50 or 100 grand. So I decided that was a conversation I was not willing to have. I did want the integrity of like facing up and maybe paying a fine and maybe being deported. Like I wanted the benefits, but the downside of jail and a massive bribe was too high. So I decided I don't want to have that conversation. So I left my very comfortable life in Bali with hours notice.
Wow.
And have not been back. So there's an example where you wouldn't. Another example is if you didn't, well, I guess it's similar, with prison. I coached somebody who committed burglary when he was 15, and he's been holding on to that for 25 years, feeling shitty about it. And so I coached him through going and having dinner with the guy whose house he burgled and apologizing and saying, "How can I make it right?" Terrifying. Now he had to look at what's the worst outcome. Okay, maybe prosecution, having my name trashed in my hometown, embarrassment, feeling awkward. And he was willing to risk all of those things for the upside, which is a clear conscience to correct something and freedom. And I've done that myself. It takes some daring to say, I'm willing to risk my partner breaking up with me to confess that I cheated. That's a bold move. And I'm not saying everyone should do it. No. I'm biased towards that kind of truth. But do what Dove said, run through the negatives, run through the positive, because your brain won't naturally bring that to you. It'll just tell you the negative and you'll just sweep it under the carpet by default.
Yeah. So, you just brought something up there, which is about this guy who did a confession to somebody whose house he robbed. And one of the things you've been doing with your work is you've been taking it from not just some CEOs and executives and high-performing entrepreneurs, but you've taken this to inmates. So talk to us a little bit about your work in dealing with inmates and why you even decided to go there.
The universe brought it to me. I didn't go looking for inmates, but I'd heard of someone years ago who was doing dance training with inmates. And I just thought, what a fascinating thing that'd be to go into a prison and help them move their bodies. And what a wonderful contribution. And then this guy told me, he said, I can't talk to you tomorrow. I'm going into a prison to help them teach how to speak your truth, how to speak your truth and relate authentically with other human beings and have tough conversations. I'm like, are you kidding? And I had always, I see a movie where someone's giving a lot in their life, like Gandhi, right? I get so inspired. And then I'd feel guilty that I wasn't doing volunteer work. I'm like, David, you've got so much in your life. Why can't you get off your ass and go and do something? And this seemed like a real opportunity. I said, can you hook me up with that? And he put me in touch, and I went and assisted, and then I co-led, and then I was the main leader for the course. And what's fascinating, well, first, one fascinating thing is I get to confront my freedom every time I go.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I can leave and I can go to the bathroom sometimes without asking permission and wear what I want is kind of mind blowing. So there's that. And then also they're so grateful because we don't do any courses where they're forced to show up. They have to opt in. And they're grateful that someone is willing to drive 4 hours and spend 2 days helping them to get a job on the outside, helping them to deal with family members who might resent them and be really pissed off at them for what they've done, helping them to talk to victims. Like one woman was like, I need to speak to the woman who's a widow because of me.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. But the interesting thing is they're the same conversations ultimately. We're all humans. So a CEO still has to deal with someone who is a perceived threat or attack or is you know, telling him that he screwed up. A prison inmate has to do the same conversation. Or CEO might have to deal with an upset wife or husband. So does a prison inmate. So it's really interesting. It's different language. Cool. A CEO is unlikely to hear someone in the boardroom say, "Step off, bitch." You know, that doesn't tend to happen, but it's the same concept.
Depends where you work.
Yeah,
if you're working in Wollongong, it's possible.
Wollongong?
It might be in Wollongong.
Did I forget that you're an Aussie?
Yeah, there you go.
I did forget. Wow. I thought you might have been a Brit. Yeah, Wollongong.
I am. I'm a Pommy, but I'm from Oz.
Yeah, Wollongong, that could happen.
Yeah.
But it's like we're humans everywhere we go, whether we're high achievers or we don't identify as such. As humans, it's like, oh, this could be awkward. This could be scary. This person has some kind of power dynamic with, you know, over me. How do I speak my truth in an artful way that can have us more connected and maybe get to the result that I want to create, which is a leadership move.
Absolutely.
And that's why I was excited about this podcast, because we often don't think of tough conversations as leadership training, but it's an absolute leadership move to say, I'm going to speak my truth and try and cause a change here.
Yeah,
well, Joel, I know, was fascinated by that connection. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the part where a leader has to go first. I mean, they have to set the course of the culture of what's accepted, what's allowed, what is real in a company. Is so like standard that to not have the tough conversations, I mean, it just locks down the company in a way.
Wow, you just said something that I'm writing down. It's so simple, but a leader has to go first. I just coached a director at a big company today, and she's upset that her boss isn't showing up in the way she wants. He's not taking the reins. He's not saying, let's sit down and talk about these tough things. And I said, it's the responsibility of the most aware person in the room.
Yeah, nice.
To lead, a leader has to go first, and that might be you. Screw the fact that he's designated as your boss. If he's not leading, who is? And we had that tough conversation.
And that's a standard I see in corporations all the time. Like, because of the hierarchy, they assume leadership is up, management is up. Leaders are everywhere. And but it's so easy also to hide behind the difficult conversation and say, I don't have to have it. It's not my role. I'm not the CEO. I'm not CMO. Why would I do that? Right. And so, yeah, that role of leader is very different than the management position that a lot of people associate.
Yeah. And I'll say to my client, well, I'm not coaching him right now. If I was coaching him, I'd be having this conversation with him, but I'm coaching you. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. I have that same exact conversation with my kids, and they hate it every time. I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell you what he should do. I'm going to tell you what you can do, because that's the only person we can affect right now. You're in this conversation. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's nice.
So David, let's talk about get paid for who you are. What's the tie there, and what's that actually about? Because I want to have people see the connection here.
Well, I'm not sure there is. We might find one, but for me, that's an old, like people kept saying to me, how do you live this life? How are you able to work from anywhere in the world and set your own hours? I was doing this before the 4-Hour Workweek came out. So I wrote a book to show people how to do it. And then I realized that, I mean, you know, we raised a bunch of money for charity. So I did get to actually, you know, do something for charity. But I realized I love business coaching. It's fun for me. But if that's all it is, it's not fulfilling my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I need to have these conversations about truth and relationships. And on your deathbed, are you going to be happy with how you're living your life right now? So I realized I felt burned out after I did the book launch. I was like wiped out saying, I've helped coaches for 20 years and I've helped people you just start a business from scratch, which isn't easy. And what I need to do after Bali, I reinvented myself and I said, I need to get back to helping people who are not struggling with everything. That's not my target market. I want people who identify as high performers. They're doing well in a number of areas and they realize there's more. There's more in life and business and they want both. And so I've reinvented myself since the book and gotten back to some of the things that really matter for me. Now here's the overlap. The part of the book that matters for me is working out what your values are and what really matters to you. Mm-hmm. And then if you can get paid for that, you're really winning. That's the holy grail.
Absolutely.
There's the overlap.
So let's just go to this because I think it's important. Whenever we are working in the quote unquote soft skills world, it's easy for people to misconceive things. So what is the biggest misconception about what it is that you do?
Well, as soon as you said that, I thought of Brené Brown, who says in one of her books, anyone who thinks that vulnerability is a soft skill hasn't tried it.
I agree fully.
Nice.
Yeah.
But what is the misconception about what you do?
I think people underestimate the value of authenticity and speaking up instead of sweeping things under the carpet. I think we know at a surface level and we'll talk about it and give it lip service. But when it comes to a company laying down money and a CEO or an HR director saying, we need to get people speaking up more. There are things they're not talking about. I know that because when they quit, it's often a surprise. Mm-hmm. And let's get them talking to each other and lay down money to maybe hire a third-party service where they can open up about it. That's where I think there's a misconception. And with people like Brené Brown and you and me in the world, I see it shifting. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be slow because I still speak to directors who are like, I don't know, do we want people speaking up? Like, isn't that going to create waves or isn't that going to lower productivity, at least in the short term? And so there's still it's just mind boggling to me.
So how do you confront that for you, when you're dealing with a CEO who says exactly that? Because there are many, I know because I have to deal with them too. There are many CEOs or leaders in those positions, presidents or whoever it might be, who are saying just that. You know what? If we let people speak up, this could blow up in our face. Yep. And again, risk assessment is this could have some very or potentially negative outcomes that we don't want.
Yeah. Well, one thing is that it's simple math. You're paying anyway, and you can either pay over time slowly, or you can pay up front with the risk of a blow up. And I suggest that the cost is going to be much greater when you add it up over time. Let's get it done now. And if that person's going to leave, let's have them leave now instead of having them sabotage performance for 3 years, even unconsciously, and then leave anyway. And I live my life that way. I'd rather something bite me on the ass now if it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I sometimes quote statistics from the surveys that show that 70% of employees say they're avoiding a tough conversation. Some estimate that the cost is as high as $50,000 per employee who's avoiding these conversations. And what people do get at the senior management is the cost of retraining somebody. So if you've got someone who's been around for 10 years and you lose them because they didn't speak up about something, the cost, it's astronomical to try and get someone else back to the point that this person was at.
Mm-hmm.
If you pay a little bit to a coach now as an insurance policy to ensure that doesn't happen, that's a pretty guaranteed return on investment. I think
it seems,
that's how
it seems really interesting from like the macro level. If like we're looking at company wide, if this becomes part of the culture and this opens up, there can be a lot of like just that building effect, that compounding element of it just growing. But when you're looking at it from an individual, a micro example, and you're going into this first, it can be really tough because you're almost, in many of these corporate cultures, you're putting your neck out. You know, you're allowing that person who's basically gunning for, I don't know who I'm going to blame yet, but I'm looking for them. It's not my fault. That's all I know. And that really stifles a lot of that micro example, because that person, I know the position's just right, where the person that wants to throw them under the bus has a better relationship with the CEO. And then suddenly it's not such a comfortable position. And though it may be better for the company, that could be, you getting fired today is a very different experience than, hey, yeah, maybe 10 years from now, this culture will open up. So from that other side.
Yeah, well, I'm inspired by what Dov said earlier. Dov talked about the mind will present the negatives. It won't present you the positives. So you have to go past where the mind normally goes. All right, here are the negatives. Let's address that, because the mind won't even address it. Let's also look at the positives, and then let's look at the positives from the negatives, which is a step that I don't normally do. So I really love that, Dov.
Thank you.
And yeah, maybe you will lose your job today. Maybe that will happen. But realistically, if we look at it, they're probably not going to fire you if you artfully speak up and you get the training and follow the worksheet. I haven't had it happen yet to anybody. But even if that did happen, is that a culture you want to be part of? That by someone speaking up, they're sacked out of hand? So that might be the positive that comes from the...
I don't know if it's sacked out of hand. I think it's the fact that there is cultures where you could be the next on the chopping block. They don't know what's going on and they're confused. Everybody's scared, and maybe truth would be the thing that brings it about, where they can actually get positive movement. But it's still for the effect on you right in that moment. It's a tough... Yes, I want the culture to change, but no, I don't want to go explain to my wife and family why, we're going to have some tough times for the next few months or years.
Yeah. I had a manager who was, he's like, I think the sales methodology is wrong. I think we can do better with our quotas if we change it. But if I speak up, I'm worried that I'll be marginalized. I won't get opportunities. Or he might decide if someone has to go, it's going to be me, because maybe I'm not a team player or something.
Yeah.
So we had to look at how he could artfully speak up and enroll his boss in it. I think if you're not arrogant and you're actually curious and listening and asking permission, can I bring a contrary point of view? There are techniques you can use that there's no reason for someone to get rid of you just because you've got an idea.
Can we hear some of those some of the techniques to really make it tactful and go into a dire situation like that?
Sure. I'll tell you the 4 steps. Let's assume you've already done your worksheet. Right, where you've worked out what I'm afraid of, what my hope is for the conversation, and what my request is. You've already worked that out.
Okay.
Step 1, ask permission. So this guy, for example, hey boss, can we talk for 10 minutes? I've got what might be a contrary point of view. Are you open to that? Can we talk about it? I think it could really increase our quotas. All right, ask permission, and I slipped the hope in there already. You're probably going to get a yes at some point to the conversation. Step 2, you share one hope and one fear. I've already shared my hope. My concern in bringing it up, boss, is you might think that I'm the squeaky wheel, or maybe I'm not a team player, or you might feel like I'm attacking you, which is absolutely not my intention. But in the interest of us having better results, I think it's worth taking the risk. Yeah. In doing that, you're letting the person know that this is a bit edgy for you. This isn't that comfortable, and you've already thought through what could go wrong. So I find that often people are more compassionate and kind in hearing that, and at least they know this is an edgy conversation versus you've got it all together and you're coming in with some arrogance.
Yeah.
Step 3, share the issue. And if you have a request, this is the place to share it. My request is that you consider this alternative sales strategy and give me 30 days to prove that it can do better. Boom.
Yeah.
Or I just thought of a personal example. Because one of the hardest conversations I can imagine, and I have been through it when I was a stupid 18-year-old, is, hey, I cheated and I want to make it right. And the request there might be, my request is that you give me an opportunity to earn back your trust.
Mm-hmm.
And then step 4, such a beautiful step, get curious and listen. So, thank you. That's what I had to say. How is it for you to hear this? Do you have a better idea? I want to hear anything you've got to say about that. And you shut up. You really, because it might be tough for them too. Yeah. They might feel defensive. Mm-hmm. And this is where you shut up and let them get it all out, and you collaborate. You might work out something together that's better than what you had in mind. And a friend of mine said to me, oh, so it is actually a tough conversation instead of a tough monologue. Mm-hmm. And I was like, she's like, nice. I'm used to doing tough monologues where I dump it and run. Like, no, get your side out and then find out their world. That's where you really come together.
Well, what's interesting in your first step, and I don't know if it was intentional, but you throw out not only, hey, I want to have this, or the vulnerability portion, but you also throw out like a benefit potentially to them.
Yeah. See, the way to keep it simple, I like to say, ask permission and then share one hope and one fear. Yeah. But when you get better at it, you realize you kind of want to enroll them in the first step. Mm-hmm. It's like, you can say, can I have a really tough conversation with you? That's not very enrolling. But can I have a conversation with you and then put the hope in there? My hope is we'll feel more connected. My hope is I'll sleep better at night after having gotten this off my chest. My hope is that we'll hit our sales quotas. Who wouldn't say, like,
yeah, I don't want to improve sales. I just want to stay right where we are. Yeah.
You've given me something in it that's in it for me. Yeah. And now I want to listen to you. Like, oh, that's your intention. If I don't tell you my intention, you might be thinking he's attacking me, or he's upset with me, or I did something wrong. That's my default.
If you don't tell people your intention, they will make shit up. That's the bottom line of it.
He's out to get me. He's trying to take my job.
It's very simple. It's very simple.
Beautiful.
Because people make shit up. And you could go, well, I don't. Yeah, you do. Everybody does. It's okay. And so that's the point of David's worksheet, is you get to make shit up that you actually can make up the shit that's good. Because this is the way the mind works. It makes shit up. So make up shit that's good. So by doing this, you actually are addressing that they're going to make shit up. And you go, okay, so let me deal with that up front by saying, here's why I'm really coming up. Then they can go, oh, okay. And you deflate that shit that they've made up, which is very powerful in any conversation. Because any of us thinking about this, any of us who've been in a relationship, you look at your partner and there's that look and you start making shit up. If you don't think you do it and you're in a relationship, you do it, because if your partner's ever looked at you a little bit sideways, you made shit up. I know I do, and I've been practicing this stuff for decades, and I'm still doing it. So you have to go, honey, I'm making, I don't actually say honey, but I say, I'm making shit up here, and I actually will say that to my wife. Joe knows my wife. I will say, I'm making shit up here, and she'll go, yep, you are, or no, you're not making shit up. That's actually how I feel.
That's exactly what that look meant.
That's exactly what it is. Yes, I am pissed at you. Okay, good. Now we can talk about it.
We in Boulder here, we use the language, I have a story that this is happening.
Yes.
Is that right or wrong?
Yeah.
And you said it so well, Dove. And a way that occurs to me is, like, I don't generally assume positive intent. And I've done
most of us do
personal growth. Someone says to me, we need to talk. I do not assume positive intent. I'm worried. So if they come to me with, I'd like to talk with you, and here's my positive intent, okay, I can relax a little bit. All right, let's, what do you got? And then when if they say to me, now, what are you thinking? How is it for you to hear this? How does it feel to hear that? Is that weird? Is it empowering or something else? Tell me, and I get to really speak. Now we're getting connected.
See, I really like that last step, David. And I think it's one that is so often missed. You're talking about that level of curiosity, which to me is vital in all development. but a level of curiosity so that the person gets to recognize this wasn't just coming at me, but it's actually eliciting from me. And I think that this is a very important piece in what's missed around these courageous conversations is this context of it's only courageous for me. No, assume that it's going to take courage to listen. And I really think that's an important piece. Assume that it's going to take courage for the other person to listen to you, to put their ego on hold and say, shh, I want to hear what David has to say. Shh, I want to hear what Joel has to say, as opposed to, I just got to get this out. This is not about vomit.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I notice I'm loving this conversation, and I do have about 90 seconds before another coaching session. So that's a little edgy for me to say, because I'd like to go like another 20 minutes here.
Okay, so it's been great having you here, David. I would love for you to tell our viewers and listeners where they can find out more about you and all of your resources.
Thank you. My website is Play for Real. We're playing a game, but let's play for real. Playforreal.life. And you can subscribe to my podcast. I have Tough Conversations with David Wood, so you can listen to me as well as Joel and Dove. And if something and you can get the blueprint for the worksheet for Tough Conversations for free. And if something resonated for you and you identify as a high performer and want both your career or business and life to be better, then see if you qualify for a discovery session with me. If you do, I don't charge for it because it's how I find the right people to work with long term. And all three of those things are at playforreal.life.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And thank you, Joel, for being with us today. And for you, dear listener, you can have conversations about these amazing conversations that we have with our guests here. You can simply go and look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast on groups on LinkedIn and on Facebook. You'll find us right there. And you can also find out more about all the things that we do at fullmontyleadership.com. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about the conversations you need to have that are going to make you a better leader. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.